through the UWA Centre for Muslim States and Societies. I, Flavia Zimmermann, PhD candidate at the Centre and from the Australian Institute of International Affairs, will sit down today with Dr. Hala Fattah. Her visit to Perth has been sponsored by the Centre for Arab and Islamic Studies at ANU through the Commonwealth CAR International Speakers Program. And today we will be discussing Iraqi society and politics, including its public sphere. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Hala.
My pleasure.
Dr. Hala, could you please explain how Iraqi's social fragmentation and sectarianism from its early days and how explicit it was in the public sphere?
Well, actually, my impression and all of that I've read says that there was no real fragmentation at the very beginning of Iraq's independence, and that there was more of a unified society, a pluralistic society. You can read many books in Arabic and English that talk about the different interpretations of journals, newspapers during the 1950s and 60s. The civic demonstrations that came together, a sort of a general coming together, cohering of Arab people, Iraqi Arab people and others within Iraqi society. What fragmentation there is basically is a historical sequence of several different developments in Iraq. Iraq has always been, encircled by many neighbors who don't wish it well, and with the exception of the Hashemite period from 1921 to 1958, when Iraq had good neighborly relations with all its neighbors, the rest of Iraq's history is basically antagonisms with one or two different neighbors, all maybe at the same time. And this created crises within Iraq itself, as well as, of course, crises outside. And the public sphere is something that came together because of education in the Hashemite period, and later on it developed many different shall we say, interpretations. Under the Hashemites, there was the communist interpretation of how Iraqi state and society should be, and later on it became Arab nationalism, accentuated both by the first Republican regimes and later on by the Ba'athist regimes. So there's a lot of development of the public sphere in that period. Now, what I want to say is that the fragmentation may have only happened later on in the 1990s when, due to a combination of factors, the second Ba'athist regime, that of Saddam Hussein, began to see exterior threats reflected internally insofar as the Kurdish problem was concerned, and for him the Shia problem. And I think this happened in the 1990s, not before. Because although we always stress sectarianism, I think sectarianism was something not very overt in Iraqi society, and it only developed later on into more overt manifestations after 1990, and especially after the Americans came to Iraq.
Sorry, Dr. Hala, would you argue that at the formation of Iraqi country and society there was an Iraqi identity?
Yes, it developed slowly, and as I said, it developed because of education and certain public policies. There was an Iraqi people, all the way into, I think, the 1990s and even beyond. I am not one of these people that says, that there is no Iraqi nation. I don't believe in that at all. But I do believe that there were many divergent voices that, can be interpreted externally as chaotic voices that may want to break up Iraq. But it's not, I think myself that except for the Kurds that do want to have their independence, I think the rest of Iraq, on one level or another, is Iraqi, remains Iraqi. National unity is important. Yes.
Thank you very much,
You're
Dr.
welcome.
Hala. And if you could please just expand a little bit more, which political events took place in the 1990s to create this great fragmentation and polarization of the Iraqi people and society?
I think what happened is that, first of all, there was the 1980-88 Iraq-Iran war, in which Iraq and Iran fought. Iraq invaded Iran, and this caused a lot of tension within Iraqi society, because you had different claims made on different sectors of society. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. And this is a very famous story. The retreating Iraqi soldiers from Kuwait, retreating after the defeat in Kuwait, were created the reasons for an intifada, what they call a popular insurrection. Both in the south and the Iraqi soldiers coming from Kuwait, and in the north, in the more contentious north in Kurdistan that wanted to have its independence. So Saddam Hussein in the 1990s sent his army against both parts of the country, and it's only then that there was this more overt sectarianism, ethnocentrism also, that appeared. So, and this was picked up later on in 2003 when the Americans invaded and occupied Iraq, and they created a sectarian system, which to my mind had not existed before, but which became very much the signature of the Americans, and also had parallels in Lebanon as well. So there was a confessional system, a sectarian system set up in Lebanon, in which you had quotas for different minorities. This only happened in Iraq after 2003.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hala.
You're welcome.
And if you could please explain a little bit more the situation of the Kurds in Iraq, that from the very beginning they did had nationalistic claims and even separatist claims, and why in the end they decided to settle in Iraq.
Yeah, there were, of course, treaties made with the Kurds prior to the British entering in Iraq. And some of these treaties promised a homeland for the Kurds. But the Kurds, unfortunately, had a much bigger neighbor, Turkey, under, at that time, Mustafa Kemal. And Mustafa Kemal refused point blank for a Kurdish, separatist state. And so the Kurds were given something of a choice: either stay under Turkey or assimilate into Iraq. Because if you know the history of how northern Iraq came into being, it actually was assimilated into the rest of Iraq after the war between the Ottoman Empire and the British. And the British had signed an armistice with the Ottoman Turks. And after the armistice, they still sent their troops and they took over Mosul province. And Mosul had many Kurds. So the choice was for the Kurds, who would you stay with? And I guess they decided that because Iraq was, under British administration, that maybe they would have, more justice because they respected the British. And so for that reason, they accepted to remain in Iraq. Now, during from 1920 to the 1990s, there was an assimilation of Kurds in Iraq. Many Kurds did become Iraqi, and some of them did not speak Kurdish at all. They began to speak Arabic. it's only after, the 1990s, as I said, there was a more separatist claim voiced by the more independent part of Kurdistan, and the idea of a separate Kurdistan began to be, enunciated. So, yeah.
Fascinating, Dr. Hala.
Thank you.
And in your opinion, how was the Saddam Hussein era, and particularly his approach to religious minorities, and if you believe that Saddam Hussein oppressed the Kurdish people?
Yes, of course. As I said before, by the way, Kurdish uprisings against Iraq have been continuous. It's not only against Saddam. From the very beginning, there was a Kurdish nationalist movement led by the Barazanis, okay, and they fought against many different Iraqi regimes, not only Saddam Hussein's. When Saddam Hussein, his behavior towards the Kurds must have been conditioned in a way by the fact that there had been so many clashes between the Kurds and previous Iraqi governments. So it's not, as I said, it's not totally, an aberration that Saddam Hussein was anti-Kurdish. That was part of a policy that was, enunciated by different governments. And the thing is, I think Saddam Hussein also cultivated the Kurds. On one level, he oppressed them. On another level, he cultivated them. And also his relationships with the Christian minority, for instance, were excellent. His relations with other minorities in Iraq also. It's, I think, yes, he's known for being oppressing Kurds and the Shia, but it's a much more complicated picture than has been, understood.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And just wrapping up our interview, if you could please explain the current situation of Iraq after, if you think about the American invasion and occupation in 2003, if you could please explain and expand a little bit more the current state of affairs in Iraq, whether there's still an Iraqi identity, and how society and the public sphere are operating at the moment.
Yeah, I think there is still an Iraqi identity because, as I said in my lectures, not one, two, I don't think there's a single Iraqi that will say, I am not an Iraqi, I am a Shi'i first and I am a Kurd. Well, maybe the Kurds will say that. Some of the Kurds will say, we're not Iraqi and we're looking forward towards an independent Kurdistan. But other than that, I really think, as I said before, that the Iraqis take their nationality for granted. So right now, what is being exacerbated, what is being really outlined is the subnational categories of Shi'ism, of Sunnism, of, the Turkmen of northern Iraq or the Yazidis or whatever. But I think there is also parallel to this, there's this sort of silent admission that they're still Iraqi. Now, the Iraqi nation as a nation has been actually developed and redeveloped from the Hashemite period onwards. So it's not just a question of an immobile or a frozen idea of an Iraqi nation. It's a nation that is being redeveloped over generations. And who knows what's going to happen in the end? What is the ultimate look of an Iraqi nation post-2003? I'm not sure. I don't know. I do know that any Iraqi state, not nation, has got to be decentralized and has got to be, has got to bring in all of the different minorities in Iraq and majorities together on a more equal level than has been seen previously. Okay, so
thank you very much.
You're very welcome, and thank you for this privilege.
And Thank you for being with us, and for more information, please visit our website www.internationalaffairs.org.au.
Thank you.